Hi, I'm Milena. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my Middlemarch vlog because Emma and I from Emma from the Overshelf decided to read Middlemarch in June and July. I think it's a very popular classic on Booktube. Once I started reading it, a lot of people share who is their favorite character, a lot of people share their thoughts. There have been a lot of read-alongs for this book, Middlemarch. I finally started it and I decided to make a separate vlog for this one, so I hope you're going to enjoy it. I hope I am going to enjoy it. I am now on chapter 8, which is very early in to the book. I have been doing some annotations already because I've been anticipating reading this book and I wanted to have my thoughts together in the book in annotations, but that's also why I want to do this video, so that I have an entire video of my thoughts of Middlemarch. So far I'm really enjoying it. It is much easier to read than I had feared because I think a lot of people have mixed feelings about this book, and one of the more negative feelings that I've heard about Middlemarch is that it's a bit dense to read. I'm only like 60 pages in, so maybe that will happen at some point, but up until now it feels very easy to read. Reads a little bit like Gaskell, like Hardy. It's a little bit of the same. It's not easier or more difficult. I'm sure a lot of people know by now, but Middlemarch is a book about country life. We meet two sisters, Dorothea and Celia. Like very early on in the book we meet two possible suitors for Dorothea, and her choice within that is questionable. I say questionable because I feel like the narrator wants us to know it is questionable, and that is one of the things I already really like about this book, because the narrator is really quite present. I really feel like the narrator has an opinion. In ways that I see the narrator do this, she shows you the behavior of a certain character and then you wonder, ooh, that might go this way, that might not be so helpful because of this reason. She explores that reason and shows you that indeed that wasn't such a good decision because indeed this character feels a certain way about this. Okay, this is super vague, but I wanted to make this vlog spoiler free. We have a woman who says that she wants to educate herself more and she wants to do that through a certain man. It seems pretty promising because yes, he does have more academic knowledge and it seems like he's willing in the way he acts towards her, and it seems that that's not what she's going to get, but we know that before she does, and I think the narrator really wants to interest the reader in that way, really wants to engage with the reader in that way, in giving those little bits of foreboding. And I started making separate functions for different tabs when I started reading Anna Karenina, and I did it for Virginia Woolf as well, because I just think I don't need to tab everything from every book because we read different books for different reasons. In the middle of the book I can always add a tab if I notice that some things are important. I have pink for feminism, I have yellow for characters, green for story, blue for politics and religion because I think that's a big part of this book, and orange for writing. I added the orange at page 50 because I thought the writing was really beautiful and I wanted to add something. Because this little bit, and it says narrative feels like a biographer, and I think that's just a lot of fun. And here I must vindicate to claim. So the narrator holds a story for us and talks to us. I think it was North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, where we were like, I think 70% in of the book, and suddenly the narrator made itself known. I'm really enjoying it. I think I will finish it somewhere in July, but we'll have to wait and see. So it's day 4 of reading Middlemarch. I started it 4 days ago and I'm now on page 124. We have been introduced to two entire cast of characters who I think all live in the same place. But it's a little bit confusing, lots of characters, but I do like the way that George Eliot describes their characters, and especially how characters compare to each other. So a lot of characters in friendship or two sisters have opposite character traits. I'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, I've read only 125 pages in 4 days, so that's not fast, but I'm going to do some reading tonight. It's the 15th of June and I'm just continuing chapter 23, which means that I have started the third book in Middlemarch. I don't think I have updated you at all while I was reading the second book. I finished the third book and the second book really surprised me because we get to know so many new characters and maybe even characters I like more than the characters we knew before. We get so many characters and George Eliot is not afraid to make you forget about certain characters because the characters from book 1 really get a big break. I haven't read about them for a long time and now there's suddenly a chapter about them again, about one of the two people again. I really like how many characters we're getting to know. I think all the characters are very layered, they're very well written, they all have a life of their own. I remember I was reading aspects of the novel by Ian Forster. And he said about Jane Austen's characters that they all have a life beyond the page, that they all have a life of their own. And I feel like that as well with Middlemarch. I feel like I can imagine and fantasize an entire past, present and future beyond a character we've just met in one chapter. And I really do that a lot. Sometimes I just stop reading, especially when there's music, and I just stare and think about what they look like. I think about where they've been before we meet them in the chapter and where they're going afterwards. That's why my reading is a little bit slow because when did I start this? I think almost a week ago and I'm now on page 258. A bit of a slow read, but that's totally okay. I didn't expect it to be anything else because Victorian novels are always slow reads for me. There was one chapter that I found was a little bit boring. It was about a group of men electing another man to be something religious. I didn't really follow it because I thought the book could have done without. I think romances are started to be formed. I think there are obstacles. I think there possibly might be scandal. And I've been doing a really good job about not spoiling myself because so many other booktubers have read this in the last years. Thank you all so much for not giving any spoilers, and I will now return the favor for you if you haven't read Middlemarch by not giving you any spoilers. I have been in a little bit of a reading slump this week, but I feel it's going back a little bit. So I thought I was going to talk about the book on camera, hype myself up and read a little bit more, and if I have some trouble following it, I will just listen to the audiobook on my reading speed and do listening and reading at the same time, because it always helps me getting into a book. And I'm doing that right now, and I hope I don't forget to update you after I've read book 3. Hi, it is Saturday the 19th of June and I want to give a little quick update for Middlemarch. I have been reading a little over 400 pages and I'm still really enjoying it. I do think this book is dangerous for me in the sense that it is really captivating, but it takes a lot out of me to read this. So I feel like just reading this kind of puts me in a reading slump if I wouldn't read anything else. So I've decided to put this away for now. I've read about half of it. This big part in the back is just notes. But I'm very pleased with this because in my head I'm constantly comparing it to Anna Karenina because Anna Karenina is another big book that I've read this year. And I haven't really read a lot of big classics. Of course, I also read the Makioka Sisters recently, which was over 600 pages. That was also a very big book. But this does remind me a little bit of Anna Karenina. It reminds me a lot of Elizabeth Gaskell, of North and South, of Mary Barton I've read from her. I think this is going to be the best Victorian novel I've ever read because I think the characters are absolutely sublime. They're all very well rounded, but I think I've already talked about that. There's one bit right around here where there are 2 chapters where a lot of characters come together. I love this in books, in TV series, and there is an event surrounding a certain person that a lot of people are involved with and certain characters that you don't think would ever meet, and you see them interact with each other and you get a different opinion about certain characters. Characters show different sides from themselves depending on how the power balance is between certain characters. I think especially in Victorian society those relationships between people are so incredibly dependent on how you're born. It's so dependent on your relations. This is about Dorothea, who is one of the first characters we meet. She is I think about 19 and right now in the book, and she says, "Was inheritance a question of liking or responsibility? All the energy of Dorothea's nature went on the side of responsibility, the fulfillment of claims founded on her own deeds, such as marriage and parentage." I like the way she questions whether you should get an inheritance or you should get a certain status or money because of your situation, how you're married or how you're born, or whether it should go to someone who deserves it and who needs it. This book does discuss some politics on that matter as well. There was a Whig politician whom one of the characters really doesn't like. I don't think I know enough about the political climate in Britain in this time to really understand it all, but I'm getting some bits and pieces from it. The young characters are incredibly funny because the romances are blooming and they're making mistakes. Boy oh boy, they're making mistakes. Some things just have to go wrong, and I had some predictions early in the book and that some things wouldn't turn out well, and so far they didn't. I'm not sure whether my predictions will make it to the end of the book. The switches between chapters I really like as well. There is never a perspective or a character I just don't want to read about, and I feel like, can we go back to that character, or did I really miss a character? I think it's done incredibly well. There are two quotes I want to share with you that I really like. I think one of my favorite bits in the book is when the narrator just tells us a story. Sometimes it's an entire page where the narrator just tells us a story and takes us along, and I think that's a lot of fun. The narrator also tells a story in a way that we get to know some of the intentions of the characters in the context of the world we're reading about. So for example, we have one character who has lived in different places and he is now going to England. He was coming to England to try his fortune, as many other young men were obliged to do, whose only capital was in their brains. I just love that, the only capital in their brains. I feel like that can just describe so many people, especially also nowadays, because the way capital worked in this time is of course not how it works now. At least I don't know, because I'm not super rich. I don't know how the super rich live. Maybe they still live like this. Most of our capitals are in our brains, right? Okay, and another one is one of the characters who isn't that well off. She's called Mary. She really has to work for her keep, and I really enjoy Mary. She's almost angelic, but usually when you read about angelic characters, especially in Victorian literature, at least what I know, angelic characters are very passive. They don't really have any opinions and they don't stand up for themselves. They are angelic because they accept their circumstances and they accept their fate, and Mary is not like that at all. I think Mary is incredibly conscious of herself. She's incredibly conscious of where she wants to put her energy. So when someone is acting in a certain way and not deserving of her energy, they're not getting it. And I love that about Mary. She is also incredibly unselfish, but not in a naive way. She knows who she cares about and those people come first. I love that. And this is her thinking about her future. And she had already come to take life very much as a comedy, in which she had a proud, nay, generous resolution not to act the mean and treacherous part. So that is how she thinks, how she feels, and how she acts is not just a philosophy that she has made up, it's a reflection of how she acts. There are a few characters in this book, I wouldn't call them unlikable, but they do bad things. There was one male character who I thought, oh, here we go again. The narrator said, I know he is not nice, but try not to judge him. Okay, George Eliot, I'll give him a chance. I really enjoy reading about him, even though he does things that are so hardly driven on his privilege. But I think that's the point. I think that's the point of his character. I think that's the role he has in the book. The thing that a lot of men grow up in privilege and who know privilege is coming their way in the future. That they take big risks and chances and that other people reap the consequences of that. We haven't really dealt with the consequences of that event yet. But I think that's going to happen, and I think his guilt is going to play a very big part in the book. Guilt in a situation like that without acting upon it is just selfish. What I want is for him to develop and make amends in some way in his character. And I feel, because the narrator says don't judge him, I feel it's going to happen. So yes, I have a few predictions of this book. I think a few romances are going to blow up, are going to go bad. And I think we're getting a scandal as well. I hope I'm not expecting too much excitement from the rest of this book, but I'm enjoying it. I'm going to put it away for now. Hi, so it's a little bit later. It is the 1st of July and yesterday I picked Middlemarch back up. I read from page 424 to 515, so I read almost 100 pages since I last talked to you. There's one thing in this book that I am enjoying, but also I feel like I'm missing something, because there are time jumps, because we go from perspective to perspective to perspective from different characters, and then there was this bit where we read the perspective from one character and we suddenly notice that they're happy in a big change in another character's life. On the one hand, I would have loved to hear that from the character itself, and on the other hand, it keeps the pace in the book, because I think Middlemarch is kind of known for having a slow middle, and I can relate to that. It's kind of true. So having those time jumps kind of does help. And one of the characters went from, you know, meeting someone being single to suddenly being married and pregnant. And that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. I think it's kind of bold to write in that way, to have a long time with a character where she is just experiencing life, where you get to know her and really taking your time with that, and then having such a major change in her life, just skip through it and then you're just on the other side. It reminded me of To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, which has 3 parts. One part is getting to know the character. The second part could be a very plot-driven part where a lot of things happen, but it's just this little bit in the book. And then we get to the third part where we get back into the character's psyche. Kind of don't mind when I alter place with that. I did have some trouble getting back into it, so the last 100 pages I read while also listening to it, and I think 1.75 speed is how fast I read. So that's kind of been great, and I think I'm going to do a little bit more reading today. This is the bit I still have to read, so it will probably take me quite a bit into July. I want to use most of this week to read Middlemarch and then start my July TBR, because I do hope I can post this vlog before the end of July. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do some reading in Middlemarch, and I'll update you with, let's say I've finished another book within the book. Hi, it's the 2nd of July and I just finished book 5, meaning that I'm on page 587. There are a lot of characters that get a lot of page time that I'm not that invested in, and I even had to go on SparkNotes to figure out what I was actually reading about. There's a lot of drama suddenly, there's a lot of figuring things out, mystery, a little bit of blackmail, I think. So the time jumps are mainly with the characters that I'm super invested in, and then we get a lot of time with characters that I don't really even know, like the Bulstrodes. I'm like, who are they? I forgot. Yeah, I'm going to need SparkNotes for a little bit. I think there's quite a lot in part 5 that is about characters that I'm not super invested in, but I did take a note of the characters I'm most invested in. We have Dorothea, who we meet in the beginning, and we have Will Ladislaw is his name, I think. He's very interesting as well. He is kind of this artistic character who has a very close relationship to his emotions, so I really enjoy reading about him. And then we have Fred, who is like the embodiment of male privilege, but his character is developing quite interesting, and he is incredibly likable somehow. So I am enjoying reading about him, especially because he's a real character. He's like a nice person to be around. And then we have Mary Garth, who is, I think, one of the more complex characters, because she is a girl that's not just looking for marriage. I think she's not at all, but she is trying to make her way in the world, and she knows she has to work to be able to do so. We have met her again in part 5, even though the place where she was in life, I feel like I missed something, because suddenly she was in a different household. Wait, how did that happen? So yeah, I'm going to do some spark noting, but I did kind of make a lot of notes, mainly about characters and story. Purple is story, and can you see it? I don't know. Purple, I used green for story before, but I ran out of the green one, so now purple is story and yellow is character. So I have been mainly noting these. I think there are some politics in here, but they're mainly about the town of Middlemarch. And I'm not super duper interested in the political part, even though I usually do kind of like that in books. The way politics are described in Middlemarch is not super interesting to me, but yeah. It's the 4th of July, it's Sunday. I just finished book 6. So there are some slow parts in book 6. I am not one to get super involved in romantic relationships in books. Especially not in classics. I appreciate the drama, but I'm not really that involved in any romantic happy endings. Book 6, My Heart. I have about 200 pages to go, which feels like a lot of pages, but in the context of Middlemarch it's really not. It feels like I'm almost finished. So I'm going to do that now. It's a super slow day for me today. I am just still in my pajamas and it's almost time to have dinner. I have not been very well this week. I've been feeling really sick. So I think that's why I'm kind of reading Middlemarch a lot, because I got a lot of time to read. Just wanted to let you know that my heart kind of hurts after reading part 6. If you know, you know. It's time to read the last part and I'm so excited, but I also feel like it's not enough time. Why only 100 pages left? There's so much that needs to happen. There's so much I need to know. It's too short a time. I'm gonna put away the book for tonight and I do have things to do tomorrow, but we'll just cancel all those things and read the last 100 pages of Middlemarch. Only 20 pages to go. Oh my gosh. What's going to happen in these 20 pages? Oh my god. No, I'm not ready. I finished it. It's midnight, the 6th of June. I'm going to make a cup of tea. Maybe have a good cry. I love this book so much. I can't believe I say this about a book that is over 900 pages. But it was too short. Oh my god. It was too short. I needed more. I needed more. Yeah, so 5 stars. Hi, it's now the 12th of July. So it's been a good few days since I very dramatically finished Middlemarch. It was a dramatic ending for me. I had a little bit of a cry. I mean, not actual sobbing, but just a few tears. I was so invested in the end. I was so invested in the romantic relationships. Also invested in the characters. Before I close off this vlog, I want to give a little quick overview of my final thoughts of this book. So that's why I gave it a few days. I think what I like most, or what was most surprising to me, is that the writing was so much easier than I had expected. It was quite easy for me to read. I think I've heard a lot of people say that it's a bit of a challenging book and it's a bit dense, but that's not how I experienced it. It was quite easy for me to get through, but I think a big part of that is because I really like the characters. I really felt a connection with the characters, and I can imagine that if you don't, that it's quite a job to get done. Talking about characters, I have tried to narrow down my favorite characters. These are not necessarily the characters that I like most or that I think are most likable or most important in the story, but characters that fascinated me and that I liked reading about. I did have a little bit of a fictional crush on Will Ladislaw, don't tell boy. No, I thought he was fascinating. He is artistic, he is clever, and he is truly interested in other people, and that's what I really liked about him. Quite an unlikable character, Rosamund, who is Fred's sister. I thought she was incredibly fascinating. I felt like she was also a rounded character, but what I found really interesting about her is that she really had a job to be done in the book. I do think that her character and Celia kind of had the same function in the story. I think they could have been one person, possibly. I think Rosamund is more of an adult than Celia. I think Rosamund is more involved in how her life ends, and I think, or how her life develops, and I think Rosamund is a more developed character. I think Celia is polar opposite of Dorothea, and therefore she has a certain role to fill. But I think that Rosamund could have filled that role in the friendships, where Celia wasn't interesting to me at all because she was a bit more flat. I think Rosamund and Rosamund marriage and the bad and good things that happen in her life and the bad and good decisions that she makes are incredibly interesting, and I thought her marriage, which, you know, spoiler free, but her marriage was incredibly interesting, and I think that is one of the more interesting things in this book as well, is the way relationships are described. And of course we have sisterly relationships, we have friendships, we have professional relationships. Those were done very well, but I think especially the marriages were done so well in this book. The engagement part and the actual marriage, it's not a fairy tale or a Jane Austen novel where it ends with the marriage. It makes sense because it's a really big book. I thought those marriages were so incredibly realistic. Although I of course don't know what a marriage was like in this time, but I think the fact that every marriage has two sides, in the sense that sometimes one person messes up and the other person does the right thing, but you can be a few months later and it's the opposite. Sometimes there's a lot of love, sometimes that love is mutual, sometimes it's from one person, but I think the essence that your personal problems are the biggest problems in your marriage is something that George Eliot got so right. I think it was very clever of her as well that most married couples we first meet when they're single, when they're not yet engaged or married. So we get to know them, we get to know their issues, their problems, and the way their marriage develops reflects that. And to me that is what made these characters so incredibly round and what made it so emotional for me as well, which was the reason why I got so involved. It's a different kind of involvement that I have when you have like a more traditional romance novel where you have two characters who have a certain relationship or meet and they build up towards their engagement, and their engagement builds up toward their marriage and it ends with the wedding. That is wonderful, that is lovely, but this is a different kind of story, and this is a more thorough depiction of the town of Middlemarch and the people who live there. But the writing was sublime as well. I think the use of words, the use of metaphor especially. I think metaphor can be a great way in a book, and I really don't mind a bit of flowery writing, but sometimes it's metaphor after metaphor after metaphor, that there's like use of ambiguous language every other sentence. Unless it's like modernist Virginia Woolf, I really don't like that. The metaphors are not that common, and therefore when you do read them, I really connected with them. I did read that quote to you about, it was about Will who came to England and his fortune was in his brain, and I'll never forget that. That's so beautiful. I will keep that sentence close to me. I also talked a lot about the narrator with you guys, and that is still one of the things I really liked. The narrator made the reading experience incredibly engaging. It was present. Sometimes I felt like in some parts of the book it was more present than in other parts, and that felt a little bit off sometimes, but I didn't really mind because I really enjoyed the narrator's voice. And the final compliment to George Eliot is the way she used perspective changes and chapters, because usually in these kind of novels there are perspective changes, there are certain characters that I'm just not that interested in and I don't really want to read about. There were a few chapters about the politics of Middlemarch which surprisingly didn't interest me at all. So except for those, I was really invested in every storyline, and I really didn't mind if I didn't hear about the character for 200 pages, because when we got back to that character, we really got the information we needed, and we even got a little bit information about the characters we were missing through other characters, which I love that. That's a niche thing, but I love those little hints, just as I love when the whole cast of characters come together in a certain event. The little clever things I really enjoy in novels. So yes, that was a lot of gushing over Middlemarch. As you can tell, I really loved this. I gave it 5 stars. I think as far as the Victorian novels I've read go, this is one I would definitely recommend, even though I probably shouldn't recommend books that are over 900 pages. But I think if you're a bit used to Victorian novels, and if you want to read about round characters, which maybe is very common, but I haven't read a lot of round characters in Victorian novels, then Middlemarch by George Eliot. So if you've read Middlemarch, let me know who your favorite character is. I would really like to know. And if you haven't read Middlemarch, let me know if you're considering doing so. I really hope you will. And I hope to see you in another video. Doei!